and you go to the professionals. If you had a medical slot on a programme, you wouldn't expect somebody to come in a mankini reading an article, a bulletin on measles. You expect a professional in a white coat and a stethoscope, or at least somebody who carries a bit of credibility. And we have to treat the weather seriously, because it can be life and death.
Well, I got a phone call from a Sunday Tribune journalist saying, how do you feel that your job is ending soon? So that was the first I heard. But that's often how these things happen.
May I say, it's been a privilege and an honour to bring you the weather forecast each evening.
So obviously it was a big change, and we were going to continue to be providing the information.
Organisations like the Met Service, they recruit the most highly qualified scientists they can find, you know? And the problem is that sometimes the people who make wonderful research scientists or analysts may not be the world's best communicators.
There was an amazing response, and as a colleague said, it was very heartening and very humbling. And I think part of it, would have been, say, the print media, you know, just going against RT, because anybody but RT, you know, and I think that was a very real part of it. And if you like, Met Éireann were like the minnows against this giant corporate organisation. I think, you know, there was some of that, because certainly there was no campaign run for Met Éireann, because we're a civil service institute and we weren't allowed to run it. You don't believe me?
Dark clouds last month for the Met presenters, but today the skies have been clearing. RTE's TV boss Joe Mulholland has been having talks with the Met Service about reintroducing their forecasters on television broadcast.
We had always intended keeping weather forecasters on air, and certainly as part of the mix, to enable new presenters to learn their trade and to hopefully become very proficient.
RT and Met Éireann have a great symbiosis at this stage, and we consider ourselves a weather team.
We're live from Waterford Port, which is home to 45 majestic tall ships, and we have been absolutely blessed with the weather, haven't we, Gerald?
We have indeed. The sun has really just been beaming down on the tens of thousands who have been here for the afternoon.
We're here for day one of the National Ploughing Championships.
Well, the rain may be around at the moment, but spirits are high and the sun is going to shine again.
How important is the weather to you on a day like today for showing the animals?
It's important. It's nice to get a fairly dry day, you know.
The weather studio is connected directly to the nerve centre, the transmission suite.
A lot of extra forecasts have been added. It is a lot more complex than it used to be. It's a lot more high-tech than it used to be, but we're constantly looking at ways to improve it.
Alan Brogan sent in, McMenamin dodging, McMenamin scoring! Dublin have won the All-Ireland! The most dramatic, the most wonderful of finishes. The fans on the hill celebrating because Dublin are winners at last.
Whether it's the swirling wind for the place kicker, the sudden shower on the golf course, the going on the racetrack, the weather has a profound influence on our sporting life. Now, one man who has watched matches through sleet, through snow, through sultry weather, a man who grew up well acquainted with, I'm sure, Stirramool, is Micheál Murhadig.
Now, there was no broadcasting box or anything like that in Ballymote. The number one amenity for me always was a good view of the pitch, and I could see the pitch perfectly. And then shortly before I was due to go on air, this man approached from the right, planked himself in front of me, and he was surprised in a way that he had met somebody with a connection to RT. He never expected he'd do that. Now I have a question for you. And I said, Cadé, what's worrying you? Why are you always running down the west? Now, you mean would be, if you like, the plural you for every being at RT. And I said, I don't know how true is that, or what do you mean? Turn on the radio any day of the week, morning, noon or night, what'll you hear? Rain spreading from the west. Does it ever spread from the east, where RT is? Now, all this was coming and the referee was ready to throw in the ball and let the game on. So I didn't know what to say to him, and I said, I don't know now, but like any good politician would do, I said, I look into that. And fortunately, whether it was the good man above or not, the following day the forecast had an easterly breeze covering Ireland. But the easterly breeze, it doesn't bring rain really. And Gaia near being shitrin. You know, the easterly wind is always dry.
The ground can change from racecourse to racecourse depending on the weather. You could have soft ground one day and a week later you could have good to firm.
I mean, the whole thing, it depends on the weather. You look at the weather, long-range forecast, people are planning where the horse is going to run. Usually fellas are planning 3 weeks in advance, and they say maybe we're going to Leopardstown at Christmas, we're expecting soft ground, and you're planning for the big races, and maybe 4 days before it, the weatherman comes out and tells you we're going to have -8, or there's going to be snow, and then all your plans are scuppered, and you're at nothing. And the whole 3 weeks in the plan for the whole winter is gone arseways. Jesus, I'll tell you one thing, the weather, whether it's conversation piece or whether it affects your way of life, there's nothing affects Irish people like the weather.
The weather is so desperately changeable. The Director General has asked us to include more regular weather bulletins in the programme at any time. And again, I'm afraid we have to interrupt the show with a visit to Seamus Cooney and his assistant, Dr. Ned Remington, at the weather desk over here. Yes.
Welcome to the weather here this evening. Just giving you a brief outlook on the weather. It might come in over the weekend, and it looks like a bit of a mixed bag, really. We're expecting a lot of cloud cover to come down from the northwest and also from the northeast there, and it'll be coming down. Basically, what we're looking at really is a lot of cloud cover all over the country, which will sweep down into the Midlands later on during the week. Of course, we also have a cold front coming up from the southeast. That'll be coming across the channel there, which has been hitting the poor old misfortunes and friends over the weekend, and they'll be getting off. They've had an awful dose of it, so it'll be helping out that way. Coming our way itself. Also there we're expecting some thundery showers which will start in the north, a lot more cloud cover there coming in across there. We're hoping too that it might clear sometime around mid-afternoon on Saturday in all the Midlands or thereabouts, and for sure.
I've always been fascinated by the influence of weather on history and on politics. You know, if Philip II of Spain had a sea area forecast, he mightn't have lost the Armada. We'd never have had the Elizabethan settlements. We'd have a very different country here in Ireland today. And the story goes that during World War II, it was an observation from Blacksod Bay that delayed the invasion of D-Day by 1 day.
Early June 4th, Allied weather experts predict gale winds striking the coast of France all day June 5th. A major disaster is imminent. If the invasion goes on schedule, the men face chaos on the beaches, drowning, annihilation. The invasion is set back 1 day, June 6th.
Today, in the pursuit of power, the politicians get out into the highways and byways of Ireland and subject themselves to the vagaries of the Irish weather during each election campaign. And even when they're successful, the weather isn't always finished with them yet.
The Taoiseach's party now swung north for the border counties, with road conditions steadily deteriorating along the way.
Taoiseach, have you ever campaigned in weather conditions like this?
Certainly not in snow like this, but I have campaigned in inclement weather. In fact, the very first election I stood for in 1948, it was about this time of the year, a little bit earlier in fact, and it was very cold and wet weather, but not snowy.
Well, my recollection of January '82, Gareth Fitzgerald was the Taoiseach at the time, and the Tanaiste was Michael O'Leary, and I think that Gareth Fitzgerald had gone away on his holidays. The Labour leader, who was the Minister for Transport, he was left in charge of the country, and then the snows came.
Some eastern small towns are almost cut off from food supplies, and these people are queuing for bread.
Michael O'Leary says he was taking charge of the country, making sure that everything was running, that everything was happening, and of course, as each day, as the situation basically got completely out of control, the country basically closed down. I can remember the images of Gareth Fitzgerald flying back from his holiday in France, and that he was going to take over to make sure the country got back on its feet again. They were using big Puma helicopters. I think they brought them in from Germany because the Wicklow Mountains, the Dublin Mountains, the farmers were up there, animals were starving, they were dying. That weather crisis severely damaged Michael O'Leary, who was the leader of the Labour Party at the time.
A lot of people said that from the time we entered government to the time we left,
it didn't stop raining, you know, and the weather was extremely bad. Now, whether, obviously that was entirely coincidental.
All along the course of the River Lee from Inniscarra to Cork City, 8 miles away, can be seen the devastation.
You can't legislate for acts of God.
The next thing when I put out my foot, the flood was up to that, and I had to come out, and what had I to do? I had to go on a helicopter.
Gardaí couldn't get to us, or the fire service couldn't get to us, so only for the search and rescue we would have, my mother would be, I don't know.
You must remember that this coincided with the financial crisis. So we had very severe weather, we had floods, we had very severe snow and ice subsequently, and then we also had people going through the trauma of a financial meltdown. All of that combined obviously led to a feeling of discontent, a feeling of dissatisfaction. It's up to the electorate to then afterwards cast their judgment on that, and as you know, they did.
For many people, this extreme weather is worrying. Is it a sign of things to come?
Every decade, for quite a long time now, is warmer than the decade before it. Not every year is warmer than the year before it, but every decade. And this is the enhanced greenhouse effect due to man-made greenhouse gases, CO2 in particular.
I've had the privilege of meeting many young meteorologists, forecasters of the future, and I've had the opportunity to pass on to them something of what I've learned over the last decades. But I can't help wondering what sort of weather they're going to be forecasting 30 or 40 years from now.
You know, if you had a pot of water and you heat it slowly, you'll see developing currents within that and bubbles bursting and things like that. And what's happening in the atmosphere is that the gradual heating of it is causing much more vicious and violent weather events. It's essential that the human race begins to take care of its atmosphere, because if the atmosphere grows or becomes impossible to live in, that's the end of the human race.
We're going to create some clouds now, just like the clouds form in our atmosphere.
We are an urban world for the first time, and we are an urban species. More than 50% of our species of human beings now live in cities, not just in towns and settlements, but in cities. And that figure's rising rapidly, so that during the next century, we're expected to go up to around 3/4 of the human population will be living in large cities, particularly in the developing world.
So now we have a cloud.
At the same time as we're becoming thoroughly urban, we're facing a period of quite cataclysmic and very difficult and quite endangering risks in form of climate change, but also in terms of the collapse of our basic food and resource systems, particularly around energy and water. So in all these things coming together at the same time that we are becoming an urban species, so an urban world at risk. One glimpse of the future perhaps is the couple of extreme winters we've just had in Ireland where, okay, that's consistent with climate change, climate extremes rather than simply just warming. And we saw the sudden and quite surprising collapse of one of our most important systems, which is the system that supplies water to us. You know, water, the fundamental thing that we rely upon, which we've assumed in Ireland is in plentiful supply all the time, suddenly snatched from us by a stressed and collapsing urban system. One way of thinking about what is in store for Ireland is to use the metaphor given to us by the renowned British environmentalist and scientist James Lovelock of the lifeboat regions, those areas and parts of the planet that are still going to be relatively more productive and fertile and somewhat less climate stressed in a general context of climate change and stress. Ireland is on that lifeboat register. It's a place that will be more habitable and more productive relative to other parts of the world. Ireland being a productive place, a stabilising place, a place that can contribute to world resource and food production needs, and a kind of stabilising point of influence for humanity during a time of great stress and change.
This planet that we call Earth is now home to 7,000 million of us human species. We dominate all the other species, we've domesticated them, we've reshaped the land and sea boundaries. The weather, though, remains untamed. And that's a thought that I find strangely reassuring.
Dogger, Rockall, Malin, Irish Sea. Green swift upsurges, North Atlantic flux conjured by that strong gale-warning voice collapse into a sibilant penumbra. Midnight and close down. Sirens of the tundra, of Eel Road, Seal Road, Keel Road, Whale Road, raise their wind-compounded keen behind the bays and drive the trawlers to the lee of Wicklow. L'Étoile, Le Guillemot, La Belle Hélène nursed their bright names this morning in the bay that toiled like mortar. It was marvellous and actual. I said out loud, a haven. The word deepening, clearing, like the sky elsewhere on Minches, Cromarty, the Faroes.
I've always dreamed of competing in the Olympics. I think I just loved it so much that I kind of just put more and more into it.
All I did was just ride horses.
I was about 3 years old. My mum used to put me up in her hunter.
He just asked me father if I go and join the boxing club, and I never turned back from there.
From 7 or 8 years of age, even before I even started boxing, I always, kind of dreamt to become, an Olympic champion.
The London 2012 Olympic Games begins with a spectacular opening ceremony, Friday at 8:30 on RTE2 and RTE2 HD.
Buddy, you're a young man, hard man, shouting in the street, gonna take on the world someday.
New Persil. Removes tough stains, even in a quick wash.
First though, Bach's Sublime Prelude and Fugue in B-flat major. It's another bright morning.
Wuthering Heights now. Let's take a trip to the misty moors of Emily Bronte.
Nyla, a piece that's going to take you on a very different kind of journey.
Elgar's Chanson de Matin, played now by the Royal Philharmonia Orchestra.
It's late, but it's never too late, as we know here on The Blue of the Night.
Celebrate the London 2012 Olympic Games with McDonald's. Get your free Coca-Cola glass on any large meal or premium salad. Starts Wednesday.
Discover the power of the One Ring through Howard Shore's music of The Lord of the Rings. Beneath an immense screen, full orchestra and chorus bring the music of